Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about chrysanthemums. Now the reason why I want to talk about chrysanthemums is because I did have a holiday in the UK in fall. So I arrived in England and we hit the nurseries and all I could see was chrysanthemums. There was so many different varieties. What I realized is that basically chrysanthemums, as they say, are the symbol of the fall season. Now why they say this is basically they're late season bloomers, and that's why in fall when I went to the nurseries there were so many chrysanthemums. So what I thought today, let's look at how to propagate it, because you too can actually have your own chrysanthemums and then propagate them, and then next season in spring and summer you'll have your own stock. So my name is Alice and I'm the Red Soul Gardener, so let's get on with it. There's literally over 100 different varieties of chrysanthemums, and they come in all shapes and sizes. For example, look at this flower here, which we buy in the florist. Look at those lovely colors. I mean, you get the brown and then you get the yellow. Now this is another one. I had it in my garden and I rooted it for propagation purposes. But this is beautiful, and it has a sort of maroon outer edge, and then the middle is yellow. So all these stunning colors is actually, it's just a showstopper. Now the thing is that you do get a hardy type chrysanthemums, and they are very, very easy to manage and to look after. But you do have a non-hardy one. The non-hardy one would take a little bit more care. So let's look at the sun or the light requirement. These beautiful showstoppers, what they require is full sun, but they can also tolerate partial sun. Now the thing about them is that when the seasons do go in autumn, the reason why they actually bloom in autumn is because the days get shorter and the nights get longer, and this sort of activates their blooming. And so what they do recommend is that if you do have it in your garden and you have a street light that is fully lit, try not to have your chrysanthemums under there, because once again you will disrupt the blooming season. Okay, let's look at the soil. Basically, they like a well-drained soil, but the thing is that they can actually also do well in sandy or loam soil. So it basically, you have a choice, but basically it has to be well drained because they don't like that water on their roots. But just have it moist all the time, and especially during the blooming season you may have to water it a bit more, and also in summer, but make sure that the soil is moist but not soggy. As the temperature drops, because we're talking about blooming in the fall, but as the temperature does drop and the winter starts setting in, most of the hardy chrysanthemums, if the climate is a bit warmer, can actually survive outside. Now the thing is that in cooler temperatures, I would say for overwinter preparations, do dig them up, put them in containers and put them in your basement. Once you've got it overwinter in your basement or in your greenhouse, as soon as spring comes and the temperatures start rising, you will see your plant getting small little shooting, and it usually comes from the base of the plant near the root stem. Now those are your little babies. What you need to do once you remove these chrysanthemums from your basement or from the house, wherever you've stored it over winter, you have a look at your plant, and any sort of dead barks, look at it and remove those pieces. And the ones that do have little babies, let's say leaves growing from the rootstock, keep those, but remove the ones that didn't survive the winter. So once the spring comes and you've cleaned your chrysanthemums and removed all the dead twigs or the brittle ones that are basically dead over the winter, but you remain with the actual plant with all these little leaves popping out from its root stem. What you do is take them, repot it, and then what you do is cover it with mulch and fertilize it and slowly try to bring it into the garden, not directly like bring it straight into the garden when it's a warm spring day, but slowly start introducing, put it in slightly in shade outdoors, then slowly move it to the position you want where it can have full sun and partial sun. So what I've done is I've uprooted chrysanthemum as usual, and I just wanted us to look at the root structure and look at where these babies come from. So what I've done is I'm just going to put it in water. I'm just going to leave it there. And this is the chrysanthemum plant. Now what you have to notice is it has a lot of rooting, and I might just take that off, some of it. Just cut it off. So now once you've looked at the rooting, you could actually understand why it is so important to look at to look after the base of the plant, because that's where the babies come from. So when you are doing propagation by division, or you want to after overwinter, and you see those little leaves at the base, try to preserve that, because that's where you're going to get your babies, hence flowers, hence blooming in the fall. So now what I'm going to do in order to look at it properly, I'm just going to hold my little baby flower. I'm just going to remove some of these roots so we can take a really good look at it. And I'm just going to put that aside. Now what I'm going to do here is, because you can propagate through division, and actually, and as we know, is that you want to keep the base actually intact. So what I'm going to do is, through division, I am just going to pull it apart, and let's see how many babies we can get. I'm going to try to separate this one here. So this is another baby here, and again, as we've seen, we get shooting coming out also from the roots, and that's where the babies are, at the base. So that's the second one, and then all these other little babies that you could propagate. There's another baby. Another baby. And the great thing about propagating these through division, as we've seen, you already have the rooting. So what I would do is actually place them in the pot and let them develop, and then once they're strong enough is you introduce them out in your garden. So this is what happens with our little showstopper. I think this one is all in a bundle here. So that is what you do if you do want to do division, and you see all these babies are there at the bottom, and they will do well. So now what we're looking at chrysanthemums and saying, well, you can do your division, and this can be done when in spring, is once you've got it out of your basement or wherever you've placed your plants for overwinter, you bring it out, and then what you could do is, if there are large clumps, you slowly open it and do separate them, because as we've seen how you could actually get quite a lot of chrysanthemums out of just one plant as they grow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pot these here in this really well drained soil, which I've got actually moist but not soggy, and I'm going to place all these in here, and then we'll go through the next step. So I'm going to just remove some of these rooting. So what I'm going to do is just place it here and then cover it. Basically what will happen is that as they grow, this will be quite a full chrysanthemum like the others. So the next one I'm going to take is this one separated. I'm going to use this one and again take some of that rooting out. And I might even place it here. This is a mixture full of grit. It has a lot of compost, organic stuff. It drains really well. And I think my chrysanthemums will be quite happy. So I'll put that one there. So this is the other one. Again, do a bit of cutting here. And I'm going to place this one just here. Okay, so we have our chrysanthemums there. Basically is that with this pot, once I've done the transplant, as I've done now, is I'm going to keep it in the shade a bit, because as it grows, we don't want it to get lose evaporation, go into a transplant shock. So I'll keep it away from direct overhead sun, let's say direct sun. And as it starts building up, I'll slowly introduce it into an area that will be happy. So with these ones, I'll just simply put them in, just like that. There goes one. As it grows, I might even later introduce it into the garden, but this is just like a transit for our chrysanthemums, so that they can be strong and I can decide what to do with them. So here we have propagation through division. And it's actually quite simple, and there you go. Now the next stage, you see, is as I'm nurturing these, I really don't want them to go into seed production. So what I'm going to go into flower production. So what I'm going to simply do is cut the tops, because that's where you have your buds, and we don't want the energy to go into flower production when it should actually be going into the root. So I'm just going to simply nip the top. And anytime I do see the flowers, I'm just going to remove them. And then the other thing is, because I've pruned it like this, is what happens is it will actually get bushier, because once you've cut the top, the plant sort of says, oh dear, I've got to produce more branches. So it will become quite full. And so another sort of advice to give is that once you do have your chrysanthemums, is that sometimes they can start blooming in summer, but you're waiting for fall where you'd like to see it in its glory. So what you constantly do every 3 weeks, do keep pinching it to make it bushier and to prevent the blooms, because if you don't, you will get blooming happening in summer. But as you nip it, it gets bushier, and then you nip all the little buds that come on, and then about maybe 100 days, 3 months before the fall, stop actually pinching it, and then now allow the blooms to come. And by the time you get to November, you have your chrysanthemums fully bloomed. Now, the other thing about chrysanthemums, they do take a while, a longer time to root. So just be patient. So if you do, for example, want to transplant it in your garden after the first freeze, is that they will take a longer time to actually start rooting. So just be patient. And then another advice is that if you do go out and buy your chrysanthemums in the nurseries, always make sure that you do have enough branches. Get a Bushier plant, because out of that Bushier plant is where you're going to get your buds forming. But if you buy a very small one with hardly any branching, what happens is that you will get fewer flowers, fewer blooms. So always look for a chrysanthemum that has so many branches, because as you pinch and cut and manage it, you will get a bushier plant, and that means you'll get more blooms. So now let's say this is chrysanthemum. Oh, so heavy. This is a chrysanthemum through division. I'm going to just move it there, it's really heavy. And I'm just going to clean this out. Now, another way of actually doing your chrysanthemums is actually to do a stem propagation, of which I've done here. So these are some of the stem propagations I had started a few months ago, and some of them have had rooting. Let's say it's about 2.5 months ago for that one, and about 6 weeks with this one. So I'll show you simply what I did. So I went out on my driveway, that's where I have them, and I picked this morning. It's always good to pick it in the morning, because otherwise they tend to wilt. And so this is the chrysanthemum that I have at the base. Now, I picked it in the morning, and because we are in summer, I just took the whole lot and I soaked it in water, and that's why they look so fresh. So now, if you're going to do propagation through cuttings, all you need to do is actually snip them like that. And once you snip them, I've got here 3 pieces. Let me leave that one, and we can do this one. So that's 4 pieces. So what you do is you get your soil, which is again organic, well-drained soil. You can put some perlite in there for drainage, or you could even put vermiculite just to keep a bit of moisture, depending. So all I'm doing is removing the leaves out of this stem. It's a soft stem, and just remove them. And we've snipped. Oh, we haven't. So I'm going to also snip the tops. Okay, these ones have been snipped. I'm just going to remove the rest of this. Then what I'm going to do now is take a sharp cut just below the node. So with all of them, that's exactly what I'm doing, is I'm just going to go and just snip below the node like that. And then this one also, I'll go here, snip just below the node. And then with these, I'm just going to put them in, submerge the node into a slightly moist soil, just putting them in, making sure that the node is completely submerged. And just like that, just putting them in, submerged. And that is what you call a stem propagation. And within, let's say, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, you should start getting rooting. Now, what I did here is that these are the ones I did before, and these have been here for about 6 weeks, and those have been longer. Is basically, as I pull out, I'm already starting to get a rooting. And again, it's along the stem. Once again, these were also propagated through soil, but then again the same thing is that I'm so sure they've got rooting. Here we go, there's another rooting. Okay, so now we've got a division propagation, we have a stem propagation. Now the other thing you can do is actually take these and again do exactly the same and remove the leaves, cut the stem, and then put it in water and again do a water propagation. But these days I always find I'd rather do a soil propagation because the roots are much stronger, whereas what I find with water propagation, the rooting is very delicate, and often enough I do damage them. So I always prefer this sort of method. Now, just the last thing I have to say is that the thing is that as the chrysanthemums do grow and they do get bushier, you have to be very careful how you water them, because what happens first is that you have to target the roots. that's where the water should go. And as we said earlier, it has to be moist and not soggy. The second thing is that as they grow and you want to transplant it into your garden, do try to have a distance of maybe 18 inches apart, because as we've seen with that variety, they actually are quite big. Now, when you have them very close together, what happens, as you water it and all the leaves are all clumped together, you may end up having mildew. So fellow gardeners, enjoy your chrysanthemums. Don't forget to like and share, and also press that notification button. And don't forget to follow our channel, subscribe, introduce your friends to our channel. Check out our Instagram. We always post all my interesting plants in my garden or my favorite plants, and it's nice to share it with you. And do comment, and I do answer all your comments. And so thank you so much, and have a lovely day.